Hello everyone, Brayden here coming to you with a breaking Disney news update as finally we have received from Disney officially the reopening dates for all 4 theme parks at the Walt Disney World Resort in Orlando, Florida. And as we predicted here a few weeks ago, not all the parks are reopening on the exact same day. They are doing a phased reopening, so we'll get into that, as well as the advanced reservation system Disney is requiring all guests to use, where you'll have to make a reservation in advance to be admitted to the parks as part of Disney's crowd control measures they laid out in this presentation with the social distancing situation we find ourselves in. We also now know about what Disney's going to be doing with the parades and fireworks temporarily, so we'll get into all of that. So starting off with when the phased reopening of the parks will begin, on Saturday, July 11th, 2020, the Magic Kingdom and the Animal Kingdom will officially reopen to the public. And then 4 days later, on Wednesday, July 15th, 2020, Hollywood Studios and Epcot will reopen as well. Add in Disney Springs, which already has reopened, and by July 15th, we'll have all the major draws of Walt Disney World back up and running in some limited capacity. Considering Universal is starting to reopen their parks June 5th, and SeaWorld is doing the same June 11th, Disney is reopening their parks considerably later than the other 2 resorts they're competing with in the Orlando area and the Central Florida area, so take that for what you will. But notice I said the parks will be officially opening to the public on those dates in July, because for other people, they will have access to these parks earlier than that, as we found out in the presentation to the Orange County Economic Task Force today, where Jim McPhee, the Senior VP of Operations at Walt Disney World, said this.
We will deploy a series of soft opening tactics for select audiences several days prior to our July 11th, with cast previews and affinity soft opening preview days.
So prior to those dates, like we saw with the other parks, we will have cast member previews as Disney tests out all the measures and changes they've made. It gets everyone working at the resort back up to speed on what they're doing, so it's running well reopening day. Who exactly Disney calls an affinity groups that'll have soft opening days? Is that like Club 33, DVC, pass holders? Is it something completely different? Not really sure about that one, but safe to say there's likely going to be people in and content coming out from the parks prior to those official reopening dates. I'm sure they're gonna have like media previews and all sorts of things like that as well. Now, the real big question with all of this, the other big piece of news we got in this presentation today, very briefly, listen to this.
We will be also managing our overall attendance demand through a new theme park reservation system. It will require our guests to obtain a reservation for park entry in advance. We'll share more details about this component in the near future.
I have to say, that's a pretty big news bomb to drop on us and then be like, we'll talk about it some other time. We'll elaborate on it later. Of course, since this lockdown began, we've been talking about how Disney needs to implement some sort of reservation system to, have a handle on how many people are in the park at any given time. Disney's going to be dramatically reducing capacity, likely 20% to start. That's the number that's been going around based on what Bob Chapek said in the earnings call as far as how they were limiting the attendance out in Shanghai when Shanghai began to reopen a couple weeks ago. I thought Disney would even do a reservation system for Disney Springs, but in reality, Disney Springs has been so empty since it's reopened, it's not been necessary, and Disney never even implemented it. It wasn't something they needed. But when it comes to the parks, obviously it's going to be another story. So we now know officially you will need an advanced reservation to gain admission to a park. You will have to have a reservation when you show up to the park to gain entry to the park itself. That way Disney can monitor how many people are expecting to go to the park, how many people they're going to let into the park on any given day, so they can enforce that social distancing. The way Shanghai Disney has been doing this, which has been open a couple weeks, they've just been selling a select number of tickets per each day, and you can only go on the date on the tickets, right? So they're just selling individual dated tickets. But of course, that won't work here because people here have tickets they purchased 30 years ago, which are still valid for any day. You have ticket packages that can be used within a specific time window, not on specific dates. You have annual pass holders who are guaranteed admission 365 days, to the park. And not only have the parks been closed and Disney has to add on all those days to people's annual pass, but now they're going to add a limiting factor to your ability to gain admission to the park. So naturally, if they're booking up these reservations to the parks, there's going to be a lot of drama surrounding that where people are like, hey, I paid to have admission on this day. Why am I not allowed in the parks? We're probably going to see stuff like that. I'm an annual pass holder. I would not be happy, to see a day you paid for to have access to the parks. And then it's like, sorry, reservations filled up months ago. That would be pretty crazy. I don't think that's going to be the case, though, so I wouldn't be too worried about that. Given how empty Disney Springs is, how much the locals are hurting, given Orlando runs off of tourism, plus the decrease in travel and the decrease in consumer spending that the banks are talking about, I don't think we're going to have issues with demand, where there's just going to be tons of people showing up to the parks every day. They're booked up weeks and weeks in advance. Perhaps at the beginning that'll be the case, at the very beginning. A big part of what will determine how all this works is the booking window, how far in advance you need to secure that reservation, how that'll work with resort guests, do they have guaranteed entry? Like if you get a room at a Disney resort, do they automatically reserve reservations for you at all the parks, or do you have to go in for specific days and select a specific one? Are park hoppers no longer going to be a thing? Because, how would it be fair if you reserve, oh yeah, I'm going to be at every park today. You have a reservation for every single park. You're taking up spots for other people who would like to spend a whole day at just one of those parks. So there's a lot of things like that, a lot of complications with this. So it'll be very interesting to see the details Disney gives us. Disney's really opening Pandora's box here with this advanced reservation system. The question of, with all these different types of admission Disney has at Walt Disney World, how fast we see the good fast passes go on a consistent basis. How are you going to manage doing an advanced reservation system, respecting social distancing while also respecting guests with different types of admission, some of which they've already paid for. And also people have different methods of planning. Some people like to do stuff super far out. Some people like to do stuff spontaneously. So there's a lot for Disney to accommodate here. And there's probably going to be some things that they're not going to be able to accommodate. Again, I think even at like the parks being at 20% capacity, let's say, in a time like this, is Disney going to be hitting 20% capacity at the parks every single day? I seriously doubt it. But given how many locals are pass holders, and when the parks do reopen, even if those guests wouldn't go spend money in Disney Springs, they will definitely be willing to go to the parks they've already paid the admission for, right? Lots to consider here, and I'll stay on top of it right here and give you all the details as soon as Disney tells us how this advanced reservation system is going to work. So be sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of that. As far as the specifics Disney gave today in their presentation with social distancing inside of the parks, masks will be required. There will be hand sanitizer and hand washing stations everywhere, plexiglass between you and the cashier. When you pay for things, it'll be touchless, the payment stuff, all of that, credit cards, Apple Pay, all those sorts of things. There's going to be reduced capacity at the parks, of course, which we've talked about. There's going to be enhanced cleaning, temperature checks as you enter the parks, which we've already seen implemented at Disney Springs, the shopping village. The interesting stuff here is, though, we've speculated about all this for a while, but now it is official. There will be no high-touch experiences like meet and greets and playgrounds to start, and they will be temporarily suspending all fireworks shows and parades because they cause people to cluster together and not follow those social distancing rules. So no fireworks, no public shows in the parks that cause people to crunch together for the time being. That's pretty sad, actually. It'll be kind of weird to be in the parks without those things. If you're thinking about planning a trip and you're not sure when to do it, if it's like your once every few year family vacation with your family, I highly recommend not getting a reservation anytime soon for Walt Disney World. If it were me, I would wait until, things like the fireworks and that stuff at least is back to get my money's worth. But if you're really, really wanting to go to the parks, that might be something to look into heading back soon, because the parks will be reopening. I do believe a lot of the booking stuff is still frozen on Disney's website, so you might have to wait a little bit on that as far as actually getting reservations for when the parks reopen. So we'll stay on top of all of that. Really just getting the parks open at all is great to see, and I'll be back with you right here as soon as we get more details on all this stuff Disney started to get into here, but they still need to elaborate on. From the Mickey Views Magic Studio, this is Brayden. I'll talk to you soon. Have a magical day.